The sound of boots pounding up the wooden porch steps shattered the pre-dawn silence. Commander Amara Jackson sipped her tea, unmoved by the commotion outside her modest suburban home. 27 years of special operations had trained her to remain calm under pressure. The kitchen clock read 5:17 a.m. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Police, open up! The shouts were accompanied by aggressive pounding that threatened to splinter her front door. Amara placed her mug on the countertop with deliberate slowness. She was dressed in simple gray sweatpants and a faded navy t-shirt that revealed powerful arms marked with barely visible scars, each one a story from decades serving her country in ways few civilians would ever comprehend. The living room blinds briefly parted as flashlight beams swept through her windows. She counted at least 6 officers positioned around her property, their tactical vests emblazoned with police in bold white letters. Officer Nathan Reynolds led the raid team, his face set with determination. 3 months on the narcotics task force, and this was his first major operation. His superior, Lieutenant Wilson, had assured him this address housed a major drug operation. "Suspect is believed to be armed and dangerous," Wilson had briefed the team earlier. "Female, African-American, late 40s, history of violence. Intel suggests military background, possibly dishonorable discharge. Heavy traffic in and out at odd hours suggests drug distribution." Reynolds adjusted his tactical vest nervously. His training had covered situations like this, but something felt off about the whole operation. Amara moved silently toward the front door, her bare feet making no sound on the hardwood floor. She had expected this moment for weeks. The predictable surveillance, the unmarked cars driving past her home, the utility workers who lingered too long. Amateur hour. In her decades commanding elite special operations units across 3 continents, she had orchestrated surveillance that targets never detected until it was too late. The banging intensified. "Police, we have a warrant. Open this door now or we're coming in." Reynolds' voice cracked slightly with tension. Amara unlocked the door and stood perfectly still as it burst open. 6 officers rushed in, weapons drawn, shouting contradictory commands. "Get down! Hands where I can see them! Don't move! On the ground! Hands up! Up where we can see them!" Amara remained motionless, her expression calm, almost pitying. Her eyes scanned each officer methodically, assessing threats, identifying weaknesses in their formation. She noticed immediately that 2 officers kept their fingers too close to their triggers, dangerous, undisciplined. 3 more were positioned poorly, creating crossfire risks. Only Reynolds showed proper trigger discipline and positioning. "Ma'am, get on the ground now." Reynolds stepped forward, his weapon trained center mass, just as his training dictated. "I believe there's been a mistake." Amara's voice was measured, authoritative, carrying the weight of someone accustomed to command. "I'm going to reach into my pocket and retrieve my identification. I am moving slowly. Hands where I can see them." The youngest officer, Jenkins, was practically vibrating with nervous energy. His weapon wavered slightly. Amara focused her gaze directly on Reynolds. "Officer, I understand you're following orders, but before this situation escalates, I suggest you contact Captain James McPherson at the Pentagon, security clearance Omega 67 Delta." Reynolds hesitated. This wasn't in the briefing. "Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "Ma'am, you need to get on the ground right now." Reynolds tried to regain control of the situation. "No games, Officer Reynolds." The use of his name made him flinch. "You're operating on false intelligence. Your Lieutenant Wilson failed to conduct proper verification. This residence has been under my ownership for 17 years. I've been deployed for most of that time. My presence here is recent, which explains the unusual activity your department observed. Reynolds maintained his aim, but felt the first seed of doubt. How do you know my name?
Amara's expression remained unchanged. The same way I know Officer Jenkins there is fresh from the academy, still breaking in his boots. The same way I know Officer Martinez behind you has a daughter celebrating her birthday today. The wrapped gift in your patrol car gave that away. The same way I recognize Officer Taylor's limp from an old football injury. I observe. I analyze. It's what kept me and my teams alive for 27 years. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. This was not proceeding as expected. You have exactly 30 seconds to verify my identity before this situation becomes unnecessarily complicated. Amara's tone carried no threat, merely stated fact. The Pentagon number is on my identification, which I am now reaching for. Reynolds nodded slightly, allowing the movement. With deliberate slowness, Amara reached into her pocket and produced a leather wallet. She flipped it open to reveal credentials that made Reynolds' blood run cold. Commander Amara Jackson, United States Special Operations Command. The identification included security clearances that Reynolds had only heard about in whispered conversations. Could be fake, Jenkins said, but his voice lacked conviction. Amara allowed herself the faintest smile. Your lieutenant sent you here without proper intelligence, without proper backup, and without proper authority. Call the number, verify my identity. Then we can discuss the serious procedural violations that led to armed officers breaking into the home of a decorated Special Forces commander at 5 in the morning. Reynolds hesitated, then made a decision. Lower your weapons, he ordered his team. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number on Amara's credentials. Pentagon switchboard, how may I direct your call? A crisp voice answered. This is Officer Nathan Reynolds, Metro PD. I need to verify the identity of a Commander Amara Jackson. Security clearance, he glanced at the credentials again. Omega 67 Delta. The line went silent for a moment. Please hold. The tension in the room was palpable as they waited. Officers maintained their positions but looked increasingly uncertain. Amara hadn't moved, her posture relaxed but alert. After what seemed an eternity, the phone crackled. Officer Reynolds, this is Captain McPherson. May I ask why you're conducting an operation involving Commander Jackson? Reynolds swallowed hard. Sir, we were executing a search warrant for suspected drug activity at this address. The commander claims there's been a mistake. A mistake? McPherson's voice turned icy. Officer Reynolds, you are currently holding weapons on one of the most decorated special operations commanders in United States military history. Commander Jackson has commanded elite units and operations you will not read about. She has saved more American lives than anyone in your precinct combined. Whatever intelligence led you to her door is not just flawed, it's catastrophically incompetent. Reynolds felt his face burning with embarrassment. Sir, we were acting on information from Lieutenant Wilson. Put me on speaker, McPherson ordered. Reynolds complied. The captain's voice filled the room. All officers present, lower your weapons immediately and stand down. You are in the presence of Commander Amara Jackson, recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, Navy Cross, 2 Silver Stars, and decorations I'm not at liberty to name. Commander Jackson has full authority to have every one of you detained for this breach. Consider yourselves fortunate if she chooses not to exercise that option. The officers lowered their weapons, faces pale with shock. Commander Jackson, my sincere apologies for this intrusion. Would you like me to contact General Hammond about this incident? Amara considered for a moment. Not yet, Captain. I'll handle the local situation first. Understood, Commander. Officers, I strongly suggest you give the Commander your full cooperation. Reynolds, stay on the line after this call concludes. The tension in McPherson's voice was unmistakable. As the call ended, Amara gestured toward her living room. "Officers, I suggest you make yourselves comfortable while I contact your superiors. Officer Reynolds, please remain on the line with Captain McPherson." The team awkwardly moved to the living room, their raid now thoroughly derailed. Amara picked up her own phone and dialed a number from memory.
"Chief Peterson? Commander Amara Jackson, I have 6 of your officers in my living room conducting an illegal search based on fabricated intelligence." "Yes, that's correct. I believe we need to discuss this situation immediately." The officers exchanged horrified glances as they realized the depth of trouble they were in. Reynolds remained frozen, phone to his ear, listening to what was clearly a blistering reprimand from McPherson. Amara ended her call and addressed the group. "Your chief will be joining us shortly. In the meantime, I believe some explanations are in order." She focused on Reynolds. "Officer, what exactly led your department to target my home?" Reynolds, still shaken from his conversation with McPherson, struggled to maintain composure. "Lieutenant Wilson provided intelligence, suggesting drug-related activity. Multiple visitors at unusual hours, suspected package deliveries, your minimal community presence. The informant claimed a female resident with military background was coordinating distribution." Amara nodded slowly. "And did anyone verify this intelligence? Check property records? Confirm my identity through military channels?" Reynolds looked away. "Lieutenant Wilson assured us the intelligence was solid." "The visitors were fellow veterans, Officer Reynolds. Men and women I've served with, coming to pay respects after I returned from my final deployment 3 months ago. The packages were mementos from my teams overseas. Had anyone conducted proper surveillance, they would have noticed the military decals on their vehicles, their disciplined bearing." Jenkins, the youngest officer, looked confused. "But why would the lieutenant target you specifically? It doesn't make sense." Amara's expression hardened. "That's precisely what we're going to find out." The doorbell rang. Amara moved to answer it, revealing a harried-looking man in his 50s wearing a hastily donned suit. Police Chief James Peterson entered, his face a storm cloud of emotions. "Commander Jackson, I cannot begin to express my department's apologies for this inexcusable intrusion." Peterson was visibly distressed. "I was completely unaware of this operation until your call." "That's concerning, Chief Peterson. Your officers executed a raid without your knowledge." Amara's tone was measured but pointed. "Lieutenant Wilson authorized this operation using his task force authority," Peterson admitted, glaring at the assembled officers. "Rest assured, he's been relieved of duty pending a full investigation." Amara gestured to the dining room table. "Let's discuss this situation civilly. Officers, you may secure your weapons and join us." The atmosphere was tense as everyone settled around the table. Morning light now filtered through the windows, illuminating a wall of framed photographs that the officers had overlooked during their entry. Images of Amara in various combat zones, with different teams of elite operators. Medal ceremonies at the White House. Handshakes with 3 different presidents. Chief Peterson looked physically ill as he noticed these photographs. "Commander Jackson, I understand you've recently retired from active service?" "After 27 years, yes. I commanded special operations units across multiple theaters. My final posting was overseeing counterterrorism operations in regions I'm not at liberty to discuss. And you chose to settle here, in our community?" Peterson seemed genuinely puzzled. "This house belonged to my grandmother. I spent summers here as a child. Throughout my military career, it remained my legal residence, though my deployments kept me away. After retirement, I wanted somewhere quiet to write my memoirs and adjust to civilian life." Reynolds found his voice. "Commander, if I may, ask. The unusual activity that triggered the surveillance, can you explain that?" Amara nodded. "After decades leading combat teams, Officer Reynolds, I found sleep elusive in civilian life. My former team members, though still living, often visit when they're struggling with similar issues. We talk, we remember those we've lost, sometimes at 2 in the morning because nightmares don't keep office hours." The weight of her words settled over the room. Several officers looked ashamed. The package deliveries, she continued, were specialized equipment for my physical therapy, injuries accumulated over multiple deployments, and various commemorative items from units I've commanded. Nothing more sinister than that. Chief Peterson cleared his throat. Commander Jackson, I understand. I cannot apologize enough, but I'm troubled by Lieutenant Wilson's fixation on your residence. This wasn't random.
Amara's eyes narrowed slightly. No, it wasn't. You're Lieutenant Wilson, approximately 55, balding, with a distinctive scar along his left jawline. Peterson looked startled. You know him? Not personally, but I believe I know why he targeted me. Amara rose and retrieved a folder from a nearby bookshelf. 10 years ago, a counter-narcotics operation in South America identified several corrupt law enforcement officials collaborating with cartel elements. One such official was a DEA liaison named Michael Wilson. She placed the photograph on the table. It showed a younger version of Lieutenant Wilson meeting with known cartel members. The operation was classified. Wilson was quietly removed from his position and returned to domestic law enforcement, but charges were never filed due to operational security concerns. He was placed on a watch list. My team led that operation. The silence in the room was deafening. I believe Lieutenant Wilson recognized my name when property records were updated after my return. He likely feared I would expose his past. This raid was an attempt to intimidate me, or possibly to plant evidence. Chief Peterson looked physically ill. Commander, this is catastrophic. If what you're saying is accurate, every word is documented in files the Pentagon will happily share with the appropriate authorities. Amara's voice was calm but resolute. I have no interest in destroying your department, Chief Peterson. My concern is removing a corrupt officer before he can cause further harm. Reynolds spoke up hesitantly. Commander, when we arrived, you were completely prepared for us. You knew our names, our backgrounds. How? For the first time, Amara allowed herself a small smile. Officer Reynolds, I commanded elite Special Forces units for over 2 decades. Situational awareness isn't something I can turn off. When suspicious vehicles began monitoring my home, I conducted my own counter-surveillance. I identified every officer assigned to watch my property. I traced vehicle registrations, personnel records. She turned to Jenkins. You graduated from the academy 4 months ago, top of your class in marksmanship, but struggled with procedural law. Jenkins looked startled. Officer Martinez, your daughter turned 6 today. You requested evening shift to attend her party. Martinez nodded, bewildered. This wasn't magic, officers. This was routine intelligence gathering, the kind that kept my teams alive in hostile territory. The only difference is that I never expected to need those skills in my own home, in my own country, against my own law enforcement agencies. The weight of her words hung in the air. Chief Peterson broke the silence. Commander Jackson, what happens now? Amara considered the question. Lieutenant Wilson will be taken into custody and proper charges filed. The officers present will provide sworn statements regarding the intelligence they were given. Your department will implement proper verification procedures for all future operations. Peterson nodded solemnly. And the officers here today? Amara studied the team before her. Young, mostly inexperienced, following orders without question, except for Reynolds, who had at least paused to verify her identity. They were following orders, Chief. Poor judgment, perhaps, but no malicious intent. She focused on Reynolds. This officer, at least, showed the courage to question authority when something felt wrong. That's worth developing. Peterson looked relieved. "Thank you for your understanding, Commander." "I didn't say there wouldn't be consequences," Amara clarified. "These officers will participate in a special training program I'll design with your department. Proper intelligence verification, recognition of unlawful orders, the ethical responsibilities that come with carrying a badge and gun." The front door burst open suddenly, and Lieutenant Wilson stormed in, his face contorted with rage. "What the hell is going on? Why aren't you securing the scene?" His eyes landed on Amara and narrowed dangerously. "Wilson," Peterson barked, "you're relieved of duty. Surrender your weapon and badge immediately." Wilson ignored him, focusing entirely on Amara. "You," he snarled. "I should have known you'd turn up eventually." Amara remained perfectly calm. Michael Wilson, former DEA liaison to Colombia, 2013 to 2015, received approximately $1.2 million in payments from the Kali networks, compromised 3 federal operations, resulting in the deaths of 7 agents. Wilson's hand moved toward his weapon.
"You can't prove any of that." "Actually, I can," Amara replied. "Every transaction, every meeting, every betrayal, documented and preserved. I simply never expected you to be foolish enough to draw attention to yourself by targeting me." Wilson drew his weapon with surprising speed. "Nobody's going to believe you over me. I'm a decorated officer with 20 years on the force." What happened next occurred so quickly that several officers present would later disagree about the sequence of events. Amara moved with a fluid grace that belied her age, covering the distance to Wilson before anyone could react. Her left hand diverted his weapon, while her right delivered a precise strike to his wrist. The gun clattered to the floor as Wilson found himself forced to his knees, his arm locked in a joint manipulation that required minimal effort to maintain but caused maximum compliance. 27 years commanding Special Forces, Lieutenant Wilson, Amara said calmly. Did you really think a frontal assault was your best option? Chief Peterson and Officer Reynolds quickly secured Wilson, who continued to spew threats and obscenities. As they handcuffed him, Amara addressed the assembled officers one final time. This is what happens when power operates without accountability, when badges become shields against scrutiny rather than symbols of public trust. Remember this moment, officers. Your authority comes with responsibility to verify, to question, to serve with integrity. As Wilson was led away, Reynolds lingered behind. Commander Jackson, I want to personally apologize. I should have questioned the intelligence more thoroughly. Amara studied the young officer thoughtfully. You did question it, Officer Reynolds. Not soon enough, perhaps, but you showed the capacity to recognize when something wasn't right. That's a start. What happens now? Reynolds asked. Now? Amara glanced around her home, at the door damaged during a raid, at the disarray left in the officer's wake. Now I finish my morning tea, which has certainly gone cold. I continue writing my memoirs, and perhaps I reconsider my retirement plans. Retirement plans? Amara's expression softened slightly. Your department clearly needs help with training, intelligence verification, procedural oversight. Perhaps my experience could be of use. Reynolds nodded slowly. I think the chief would welcome that conversation. As the last officers left her home, Amara Jackson stood on her porch watching the sunrise. For 27 years she had defended her country from external threats, never imagining that one day she would face injustice from within the system she had sworn to protect. But as she surveyed the neighborhood now stirring to life, families preparing for work and school, unaware of the drama that had unfolded before dawn, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle for integrity didn't end with retirement. It simply took new forms. And Commander Amara Jackson had never been one to walk away from a worthy fight. 3 days after the raid on her home,
Commander Amara Jackson sat across from Chief Peterson in his office, reviewing personnel files. The morning sun cast long shadows through the blinds, creating alternating patterns of light and dark across the scattered documents. "Your department has systemic issues that go beyond Wilson," Amara observed, her finger tracing a pattern of complaints that had been consistently dismissed over the years. The corruption didn't happen overnight. Peterson rubbed his tired eyes. Wilson cultivated loyalties, built his narcotics task force with officers who wouldn't question his methods. The mayor's demanding answers, the FBI's crawling through our files, and public trust is at an all-time low. And you need someone with experience to help rebuild that trust. Amara closed the folder before her. "I'll take the position, special advisor on departmental reform, but with full authority to implement necessary changes. The union won't like an outsider with that much power. The union can explain to the public why they're resisting reforms after a corrupt lieutenant used police resources to conduct personal vendettas." Amara's voice remained calm but carried unmistakable authority. "Your department has a choice, Chief: meaningful change or federal oversight. I'm offering you the chance to control your own destiny." Peterson nodded reluctantly. "When can you start?" "I already have." Amara spread out a series of documents she had prepared.
These are my initial recommendations: training protocols, accountability measures, and community engagement initiatives, and a complete restructuring of your internal affairs division. As Peterson reviewed the documents, his expression shifted from skepticism to grudging respect. "This is comprehensive. 27 years leading special operations teams taught me to analyze weaknesses and develop actionable solutions." Amara stood, smoothing her impeccably tailored pantsuit. "I'll need an office and access to all departmental records." "You'll have them by the end of day," Peterson promised. As Amara turned to leave, Officer Reynolds appeared in the doorway, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "Commander Jackson," he began hesitantly, "there's something you should know about Lieutenant Wilson." Amara raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "He escaped custody during transfer to the Federal Detention Center." Reynolds swallowed hard. "He's armed and has made threats specifically against you." Peterson cursed under his breath. "When did this happen?" 20 minutes ago. FBI has taken lead on the manhunt, but they wanted us to ensure Commander Jackson's safety." Amara remained perfectly still, her expression unchanged. "Thank you for the information, Officer Reynolds. I'll adjust my security accordingly." "Commander, we can provide a protective detail," Peterson offered. "That won't be necessary." Amara's tone made it clear the matter wasn't open for discussion. "Wilson is desperate and cornered. He'll make mistakes. Focus your resources on the manhunt." As Mara left the station, she maintained the calm demeanor that had become her trademark, but her mind was already calculating possibilities. Wilson was dangerous not because he was skilled. His clumsy attempt to intimidate her had proven his tactical limitations, but because he was desperate. Desperate men took risks. Desperate men with police training and connections were particularly problematic. Her phone buzzed with a secure message. "Captain Macpherson from the Pentagon. Wilson's escape assisted by unknown accomplices. Possible cartel connections activated. Recommend immediate security protocols." Amara typed a brief response. "Understood. Continuing as planned." Instead of returning to her grandmother's house, which Wilson would certainly target, Amara drove to a nondescript apartment building on the edge of town. She had secured this secondary location within hours of the raid on her home, a professional habit formed through decades of operations in hostile territory. Always have fallback positions. Always anticipate the enemy's next move. The sparsely furnished apartment held only essentials: secure communications equipment, basic provisions, and a locked case containing specialized equipment from her military career. She activated the security system, then methodically checked each room before settling at the kitchen table with her laptop.
Wilson's personnel file revealed the expected pattern: rapid promotions despite mediocre performance evaluations, investigations that mysteriously dissolved, complaints that vanished from records. But it was his financial disclosures that told the real story. On a lieutenant's salary, he owned 3 properties, including a lake house valued at $1.2 million. His children attended expensive private schools. His wife wore jewelry that cost more than his annual income. Classic indicators of corruption that anyone with proper training would have flagged years ago. Her secure phone rang, a number she recognized immediately. "Marcus," I answered, her voice softening slightly. "I wondered when you'd hear." Colonel Marcus Daniels had served alongside Amara for 15 years, commanding parallel special operations units before taking a Pentagon position overseeing global counter-narcotics operations. "Amara, what the hell are you doing?" His voice held equal measures of concern and exasperation. "You were supposed to be retiring, writing your memoirs, not engaging a corrupt police department single-handed." "Plans change." Amara checked the security feeds, showing the apartment building's entrances. "Wilson made this personal. Wilson is cartel-connected and desperate. His Colombian contacts have reactivated. We're seeing money movements, communications. This isn't just a corrupt cop with a grudge. He's calling in serious favors."
Amara processed this information with the same methodical calm she applied to all intelligence updates. Expected. He knows what happens to him in federal custody. His only play is to eliminate the primary witness against him. "Which is precisely why you need to let us handle this," Marcus insisted. "The team can be there in 4 hours. Blake, Rodriguez, Chen, they're all standing by." "My old team," Amara said with a touch of fondness. "But no, this is local. This is my community now. If I run at the first sign of trouble, what message does that send?" "The message that you're not suicidally stubborn," Marcus suggested dryly. Amara allowed herself a small smile. "I survived 3 wars, Marcus. I can handle one desperate ex-cop." "At least tell me you're taking precautions." "Secondary location secured. Contingency plans in place. I'm monitoring Wilson's known associates for unusual activity." She paused. "But I could use intelligence support. Wilson must have communication channels we aren't seeing." Marcus sighed in resignation. "I'll redirect satellite coverage and set up a secure data feed to your location. But Amara, if this escalates, then I'll reconsider," she conceded. "For now, I'm proceeding as planned." The department needs fundamental restructuring, and Wilson's escape only proves how deep the corruption runs. After ending the call, Amara methodically prepared for the coming confrontation. She knew Wilson wouldn't wait long. Every hour increased the likelihood of his capture by federal authorities. He would strike soon, likely with whatever allies he could muster from within the department. Her phone buzzed with a text from Officer Reynolds. 3 officers who worked closely with Wilson called in sick today. No contact since. Chief Peterson wants to speak with you urgently. Amara dialed Peterson immediately. "We have a situation," the chief began without preamble. "Internal Affairs just discovered that Wilson had a shadow personnel system, unofficial files on officers with personal problems, gambling debts, affairs, drinking issues. He used them for leverage." "Classic corruption methodology," Amara noted. "How many officers are potentially compromised?" "At least 7, possibly more. 3 are currently unaccounted for." "They're with Wilson," Amara stated with certainty. "He's building a strike team. Chief, you need to secure the department against insider threats immediately. Change access codes, restrict sensitive areas, implement buddy systems for all officers." "Already done," Peterson assured her. "But I'm more concerned about you. Wilson was obsessed with your files, had photographs of your house, surveillance notes. This goes beyond professional retaliation. He sees me as the obstacle between him and freedom. Eliminate me, eliminate the primary witness connecting him to the cartels. We need to get you into protective custody." "No," Amara's tone left no room for debate. "Wilson expects me to hide, to run. He'll be prepared for that.
What he won't expect is for me to continue with my duties openly. That's insanely dangerous. Precisely why it will work. Wilson thinks tactically, not strategically. He'll be looking for signs of fear, for defensive postures. When I show up tomorrow morning to continue departmental reforms, it will disrupt his expectations, force him to revise his plans, and make you a perfect target. A visible target is not the same as a vulnerable one, Chief. Amara, check the time. I'll be at the station at 0800 tomorrow. Have Officer Reynolds meet me at the main entrance. He's demonstrated sound judgment. I trust him to watch my back. Despite Peterson's continued protests, Amara ended the call and returned to her surveillance monitors. The apartment building remained quiet. No unusual activity, no suspicious vehicles. But Amara knew better than to rely solely on technology. Wilson had police training and connections. He might not find her backup location immediately, but he would be gathering intelligence, preparing. Night fell, casting the apartment into darkness. Amara moved through the rooms without turning on lights, her movements sure and purposeful despite the gloom. Years of night operations had made darkness a familiar ally rather than something to be feared. Her secure phone buzzed with an incoming data package from Marcus. Satellite imagery, communication intercepts, financial traces, all focused on Wilson's network. She analyzed the data methodically, building a mental map of Wilson's resources and likely movements.
3 hours later, she had her answer. Wilson had activated a network of 5 officers and at least 4 civilian associates with cartel connections. They had gathered at a farmhouse 20 miles outside town, a property not connected to Wilson in any official records, but linked to his brother-in-law through a shell company. Amara studied the thermal imagery of the farmhouse. 8 heat signatures moving with purpose, preparing weapons, planning. They would come for her tomorrow, probably during her very public appearance at the police station. Perfect. Morning broke with a thunderstorm that seemed fitting for the day ahead. Amara dressed with deliberate care. Charcoal pantsuit, sensible shoes that wouldn't restrict movement, hair pulled back in a tight bun. No jewelry that could be grabbed in a physical confrontation. No loose clothing that might snag or restrict access to concealed defensive tools. She arrived at the police station precisely at 0800. Officer Reynolds waited nervously by the entrance, clearly uncomfortable with his assignment. "Commander Jackson," he greeted her, eyes scanning the parking lot. "Chief Peterson wanted me to escort you directly to his office." Of course. Amara matched his pace as they entered the building. She noted the heightened security, officers at every entrance, identity checks for all personnel, visible sidearms that had previously been holstered. "The department is on high alert." Wilson made threats against multiple officers who refused to support him, Reynolds explained as they walked. "Internal Affairs has been working through the night identifying compromised personnel." "Good. Sunlight is the best disinfectant." They reached Peterson's office to find the chief in conference with FBI Special Agent Diana Chen. Amar recognized her immediately from joint counterterrorism operations years earlier. "Commander Jackson," Chen stood to greet her. "It's been a while." "Kabul 2015, Amar confirmed. "Your intelligence on the Haqqani network was impeccable." Chen smiled slightly. "You remember?" "I remember everyone who saved my team's lives." Amara turned to Peterson. "Chief, I assume the FBI is taking lead on Wilson's capture?" "Joint Task Force," Chen answered instead. "Local knowledge combined with federal resources. We've identified the farmhouse where Wilson's staging, but we're concerned about a frontal assault. He has hostages, 2 civilian family members of officers who refused to join him." Amar processed this new information. Desperation tactics. He's running out of options, escalating the stakes. "Which is why we need to move cautiously," Peterson insisted, "and why you need to reconsider your position on protective custody." "Chief Peterson is right," Chen added. "Wilson's communications indicate you are his primary target. He believes eliminating you removes the strongest witness against him." "I'm aware of his intentions," Amara said calmly,
But placing me in protective custody doesn't solve your hostage situation. In fact, it potentially worsens it by removing Wilson's primary objective. "What are you suggesting?" Chen asked, her expression suddenly alert. "Wilson wants me. Let him believe he can get to me." "Absolutely not," Peterson objected immediately. "We're not using you as bait." "Not bait," Amar corrected. "A calculated tactical advantage. Wilson believes I'll be here at the station today, continuing my work on departmental reforms. His intelligence is sound. I am here. What he doesn't know is that we are aware of his location and his hostages." Chen studied her with new interest. "You're proposing a feint." "Precisely. While Wilson focuses his attention here, preparing to strike at me, your team moves on the farmhouse to secure the hostages." "And leaves you exposed as his target," Peterson pointed out. "I've been a target my entire career, Chief. The difference is that now I know exactly who's targeting me and approximately when they'll strike." Amar turned back to Chen. "The farmhouse operation should be timed to coincide with the department's midday shift change, maximum confusion, multiple vehicles moving in and out of the parking lot. That's when Wilson will make his move." Chen considered this. "It could work, but it places you at significant risk." "Risk is a relative concept," Amar replied. "I commanded special operations teams in environments where every civilian was potentially hostile. This situation is considerably more controlled."
"You came prepared for this exact scenario." "I came prepared for multiple scenarios, Officer Reynolds. In special operations, we call it contingency planning." She handed him a similar modified radio. "You have a choice to make. Stay with the standard security response, or join me in ending this situation definitively." "What exactly are you planning?" "Wilson believes he's hunting me. I intend to reverse that dynamic." Her eyes held a focused intensity that Reynolds found both reassuring and slightly terrifying. "Are you with me?" Reynolds hesitated only briefly. "I'm with you, Commander." "Good." Amara checked her watch. "Wilson will move systematically through the building, clearing rooms, looking for me, but he'll be listening to departmental communications, anticipating security responses. We're going to use that against him." She activated the modified radio and spoke clearly. "All units, Commander Jackson is being moved to secure location Alpha. Escort team departing from south entrance in 2 minutes." Reynolds understood immediately. "We're feeding him false information." "Precisely. Now Wilson believes I'm being evacuated through the south entrance. He'll redirect his team to intercept, temporarily splitting his forces." Amara moved to the door. "We use that division to isolate and neutralize his team one by one." Amara and Reynolds moved swiftly through the building's service corridors, bypassing main hallways where Wilson's team would be watching. The police station had become a tactical battlefield, with the advantage of familiar terrain now neutralized by Wilson's insider knowledge. "Wilson has 3 officers with him," Amara explained, as they descended a rarely used stairwell. "Jenkins, the rookie you mentioned, Ramirez from narcotics, and Simmons from tactical response." Reynolds looked surprised. "How did you—" "Thermal imaging from the Pentagon's satellite feed. 4 heat signatures entering through the maintenance access, moving in tactical formation." Amara checked a small device that displayed the building's layout, with moving dots indicating personnel positions. "Wilson trained them. They'll move as a unit, covering all angles." They reached the 2nd floor, where the Emergency Operations Center provided a central monitoring hub for the entire building. Through the reinforced windows, they could see officers coordinating the response, unaware of their approach. "We need access to the building's systems. Security cameras, door controls, communications." "That's EOC," Reynolds confirmed, "but it's locked down during emergencies. Biometric access only." "Your palm print should work, Officer Reynolds. You're authorized personnel." Reynolds hesitated, but the security protocol is designed to keep threats out while allowing authorized personnel to assist in coordinating responses. Amara met his gaze steadily. "You're not breaking protocol. You're fulfilling your duty to protect this department." After a moment's consideration, Reynolds nodded and placed his palm on the scanner. The door unlocked with a soft click, allowing them entry. Inside, 4 officers monitored systems and coordinated communications. They looked up in surprise as Amara and Reynolds entered. "Commander Jackson?" The shift supervisor, Sergeant Torres, rose from her station. "You're supposed to be at the evacuation point." "Change of plans, Sergeant." Amara moved to the central monitoring station. "Wilson is in the building with 3 corrupted officers. They believe I'm being evacuated through the south entrance." Torres's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. "You're redirecting them away from your actual position." "Precisely. And now I need building-wide systems access to isolate and neutralize the threat." Without hesitation, Torres entered her command codes, giving Amara full control over the station's integrated security systems. "What's your plan, Commander?" "Divide and conquer." Amara studied the security feeds showing Wilson's team moving through the 3rd floor. Wilson trained these officers. They trust his leadership, follow his commands without question. We remove Wilson from the equation, they lose their center of gravity. She turned to Reynolds. "Officer, I need you to coordinate with the external security teams. Ensure no one attempts to enter the building until we've contained the situation." As Reynolds moved to a communication station, Amara addressed Torres. "Sergeant, I need selective control of the building's lighting, door access, and ventilation systems."
Torres typed rapidly, transferring the requested controls to Amara's station. "System access granted, Commander. What's our role?" "Maintain communication blackout for Wilson's team while keeping our own channels secure." Amara's fingers moved across the keyboard, programming a series of commands. "And prepare for isolated power disruptions throughout the building." On the monitors, Wilson's team had reached the 3rd floor security station, where they expected to intercept Amara's evacuation. Finding it empty, Wilson gestured angrily, redirecting his team toward the stairwells. His face, captured clearly on the security cameras, showed a dangerous combination of rage and desperation. "He's realizing the evacuation announcement was false," Amara observed. "Now he'll split his team to cover more ground. That's when we isolate them." As predicted, Wilson divided his forces. He sent Jenkins to monitor the north stairwell, Ramirez to cover the main entrance, while he and Simmons continued toward the executive offices where they believed Amara might be hiding. "Now," Amara said softly. She executed the first sequence of commands. On the 2nd floor, all lights in the north corridor suddenly went dark. A moment later, the emergency exit door beside Jenkins slammed shut and locked automatically. The young officer spun around, weapon raised, suddenly isolated from his team. "What's happening?" Torres asked, watching the monitors intently. "Creating confusion and separation," Amara explained. "Jenkins is the weakest link, young, impressionable, likely following Wilson out of misplaced loyalty rather than corruption. We isolate him first, give him a chance to surrender." She activated the public address system for that specific corridor. "Officer Jenkins, this is Commander Jackson. You're alone, cut off from Wilson's team. Consider your next actions carefully." On the monitor, Jenkins' panicked face was illuminated by emergency lighting. "Commander, where are you?" "That's not relevant. What matters is where you are, committing felony crimes in collusion with a fugitive. The FBI has secured the farmhouse. The hostages are safe. Wilson has no leverage left." Jenkins lowered his weapon slightly, uncertainty evident in his posture. "He said you were framing him, that you had no proof." "He lied, Jenkins. We have documented evidence of his cartel connections dating back 10 years, financial transfers, meetings with known operatives, compromised operations. Every officer who stands with him now faces the same federal charges." Jenkins seemed to deflate before their eyes. "I didn't know. He said it was just departmental politics, that you were trying to take control." "You have one chance, Jenkins. Place your weapon on the floor and approach the security station with your hands visible. Demonstrate that you were manipulated rather than willingly corrupt." After a moment's hesitation, Jenkins placed his weapon on the ground. "I'm surrendering," he called out, raising his hands. Amara nodded to Torres, who dispatched 2 officers to take Jenkins into custody. "1 down, 3 to go," Amara murmured. Wilson's voice suddenly crackled through the building's emergency system. "Attention all officers. Commander Jackson is manipulating building systems. She's the threat, not us. She's attempting to frame loyal officers to cover up her own corrupt activities." "He's getting desperate," Reynolds observed, "trying to create confusion among responding officers." "A predictable tactic," Amara replied calmly, "but easily countered." She activated the command center's secure communication system, connecting directly to Chief Peterson and the FBI tactical team outside. "Chief, be advised that Wilson has accessed emergency systems and is broadcasting false information. All legitimate communications will come through this channel only. Authentication code Sierra Echo Victor November." "Understood, Commander. The building is fully contained. No one enters or leaves without direct authorization. FBI team reports the hostages are secure. Wilson has nowhere to go." "Good. Maintain external security. We're isolating his team members one by one."
Returning to the security monitors, Amara noted that Ramirez had taken position near the main entrance, covering what he believed would be Amara's evacuation route. Like Jenkins, he was now separated from Wilson and vulnerable. "Time for the next phase," Amara announced. She typed a series of commands into the system. Throughout the building, fire alarms suddenly blared, followed by the hiss of sprinkler systems activating on the first floor only, directly where Ramirez was positioned. "Standard response protocol requires all officers to assist with evacuation," Amara explained as they watched Ramirez's confused reaction on the monitors. Ramirez now has to choose between maintaining his position and following department procedures. As water rained down, officers and administrative staff began evacuating through designated routes. Ramirez looked increasingly uncomfortable, torn between Wilson's orders and his training. "Officer Ramirez," Amara's voice came through on his radio only, using a frequency isolated from Wilson's team. "This is Commander Jackson. You're facing a critical decision point. The building is being evacuated. Civilians need protection. What is your primary duty as an officer?" On screen, Ramirez's internal conflict was visible in his posture. Finally, he lowered his weapon and began directing civilians toward the exits. "He's choosing duty over corruption," Reynolds said with evident relief. "People rarely begin their careers intending to become corrupt," Amara observed. "It happens incrementally, small compromises that lead to bigger ones. Sometimes they just need a clear path back to their original purpose." Once the civilians were safely evacuated, Amara sent security teams to take Ramirez into custody. Unlike Jenkins, he surrendered without hesitation, placing his weapon on the floor before the security team even approached. "2 down," Torres said, "but Wilson and Simmons will be the most difficult. Both have tactical training. Both have everything to lose." "Which makes them predictable," Amara countered. "When facing defeat, trained operatives always revert to contingency planning. Wilson will have an escape route prepared. He's not here for a last stand. He wants to eliminate me and disappear." She studied the schematics carefully. "There," she pointed to a maintenance tunnel connecting the police station to the adjacent courthouse. "It's not on standard blueprints, but it would provide an evacuation route away from the main security perimeter." "How could Wilson even know about that?" Reynolds questioned. "Long-term corruption creates networks of knowledge. Maintenance workers, contractors, city planners. Wilson would cultivate relationships with anyone who could provide useful information." She turned to Reynolds and Torres. "Continue monitoring systems from here. I'm going to intercept Wilson before he reaches that tunnel." Reynolds stepped forward immediately. "Commander, with all due respect, you're Wilson's primary target. You can't go alone." Amara studied the young officer thoughtfully. "Your concern is noted, Officer Reynolds, but this confrontation has been inevitable since Wilson targeted my home. He needs to understand the consequences of that decision." "Then I'm coming with you," Reynolds insisted. "Chief Peterson assigned me to your security detail. I'm fulfilling that assignment."
After a moment's consideration, Amara nodded. Very well, but you follow my lead exactly. Wilson is dangerous precisely because he has nothing left to lose. They exited the command center, moving silently through service corridors toward the building's lower levels where the maintenance tunnel connected to the courthouse. Amara's movements were fluid and purposeful, each step carefully placed to minimize sound. Reynolds followed her lead, impressed by her tactical awareness despite being years removed from active field operations. Wilson and Simmons have separated. Amara checked her tracking device. Wilson's moving toward the tunnel as predicted. Simmons is searching the executive offices. Should we alert security about Simmons? Reynolds asked. Already done. Amara tapped her communications device. A tactical team is moving to contain him. Our priority is Wilson. They descended to the basement level, moving through dimly lit corridors filled with maintenance equipment and storage. The air was cooler here, heavy with the scent of old paper files and industrial cleaning supplies. The tunnel entrance is behind the record storage room, Amara whispered as they approached a heavy metal door.
Wilson will need to pass through here to reach it. She positioned Reynolds on one side of the corridor, then took cover on the opposite side. When he appears, let him pass between us. I'll engage first. You provide backup only if necessary. Reynolds nodded, drawing his weapon, but keeping it lowered. They waited in silence, the only sounds the distant alarms still ringing throughout the upper floors and the hum of the building's ancient ventilation system. Minutes passed. Amara remained perfectly still, her breathing calm and measured. Reynolds shifted uncomfortably once or twice, but maintained his position. Finally, the soft sound of approaching footsteps broke the silence. Wilson appeared at the far end of the corridor, moving cautiously, weapon drawn. His uniform was disheveled, his face streaked with sweat. He checked each doorway as he passed, his movements betraying his desperation. Amara waited until he was directly between their positions before stepping out. "Lieutenant Wilson," her voice echoed in the confined space. "This ends now." Wilson spun, weapon raised, but froze when he found himself facing Amara, who stood calmly, hands empty but positioned for immediate action. "You," he snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger. "You ruined everything." "You ruined everything yourself, Wilson." Amara's voice remained calm, almost compassionate. 20 years of service, thrown away for drug money, a respected position used to terrorize instead of protect. Your team has surrendered, the hostages are safe, there's nowhere left to run. I still have this, Wilson gestured with his weapon, and once you're gone, it's just your word against mine, no witness, no case. Is that what your cartel handlers told you? Amara took a single step forward, that eliminating me would solve your problems. They lied, Wilson. The evidence against you was secured years ago, multiple sources, multiple agencies. I'm just one witness among many. Uncertainty flickered across Wilson's face, quickly replaced by rage. You're lying. This all started when you showed up. No, Wilson. It started when you decided to betray your oath, when you chose personal gain over public trust, when you thought your badge made you untouchable. Wilson's weapon wavered slightly. You don't understand. They approached me when I had nothing. Debts, a sick wife, a department that paid garbage salaries. They offered a way out. And now that way has led you here, Amara replied. Lower your weapon, Wilson. Face justice with whatever dignity you have left. For a moment, it seemed he might comply. Then his eyes hardened. Not a chance, Commander. He fired, but Amara was already moving. With a speed that belied her years, she sidestepped the shot while closing distance. Before Wilson could adjust his aim, she executed a precise strike to his wrist, sending the weapon clattering to the floor. Wilson lunged forward, attempting to grapple, but Amara was prepared. She redirected his momentum, using his own body weight against him. In a fluid sequence of movements, she locked his arm, swept his legs, and brought him to the ground with controlled force. 27 years commanding special forces, she reminded him as she secured his wrists with restraints. Did you really think this would end any other way? Reynolds emerged from his position, weapon trained on Wilson. Lieutenant Michael Wilson, you're under arrest for corruption, kidnapping, attempted murder, and about a dozen other federal charges I'm sure the FBI is eager to discuss with you. As they brought Wilson to his feet, he glared at Amara with pure hatred. "You think this is over? You have no idea how deep this goes. There are others, people you'd never suspect. They'll come for you." "Let them come," Amara replied simply. "I'll be here." Security teams arrived to take Wilson into custody. As they led him away, Amara watched thoughtfully, recognizing the end of one battle and the beginning of another. Wilson's claims of wider corruption couldn't be dismissed. Corrupt networks rarely began or ended with a single officer. Reynolds approached her as the corridor cleared. "Commander, I've never seen anyone move like that." "Training and experience, Officer Reynolds. Nothing more." She checked her communication device. "Simmons has been apprehended. The building is secure." They made their way back to the main level, where Chief Peterson waited with FBI Special Agent Chen. The relief on their faces was evident as Amara approached.
"Commander Jackson," Peterson began, "once again you've demonstrated why your reputation precedes you. Wilson is in custody, his team neutralized with minimal property damage and no casualties. The outcome was never in doubt, Chief." Amara surveyed the officers gathering in the lobby, many looking at her with newfound respect. But this is just the beginning. Wilson's corruption suggests a deeper problem. "We've already identified 3 other officers with suspicious financial activities," Agent Chen confirmed. "And Wilson's communications indicate possible connections to city officials and even judiciary members. A systemic issue requiring a systemic response." Amara turned to address the assembled officers. What happened today wasn't about one corrupt lieutenant or a few compromised officers. It was about what happens when we forget the fundamental purpose of our profession. The room fell silent as she continued. "You all took an oath to protect and serve, not to wield power, not to enforce personal agendas, but to uphold justice and safeguard your community. Wilson forgot that oath. Others followed his example. But today, we begin rebuilding." Officer Jenkins stood among those gathered, his expression a mixture of shame and relief. Ramirez was there too, head bowed but standing straight. "Some of you were misled," Amara acknowledged, looking directly at them. "Others saw warning signs but remained silent, fearing retaliation or dismissal. Those patterns end today. This department will implement new oversight measures, ethical training, and accountability systems." She turned back to Peterson. "Chief, with your permission, I'd like to expand my role as special advisor. The reforms we discussed earlier need to be implemented immediately and comprehensively. After today's events, Commander, I think the entire department would welcome your leadership." Peterson gestured to the officers around them, many of whom nodded in agreement. "Not leadership," Amara corrected. "Guidance. The true leaders must come from within your ranks. Officers who remember their oath, who place service above self-interest, who have the courage to stand against corruption even when it wears a badge." Her gaze found Reynolds, who stood slightly apart from the others. Officers like Reynolds, who question authority when something felt wrong, who followed their moral compass rather than blindly following orders. Reynolds looked surprised at being singled out. "I was just doing my job, Commander." "No, Officer Reynolds. You were doing something far more important than your job. You were upholding your oath, even when it would have been easier to look away." As the gathering dispersed, Amara found herself surrounded by officers eager to express their gratitude or ask questions about the coming reforms. She addressed each one with the same calm attention she had displayed throughout the crisis, treating rookie officers with the same respect she showed department veterans. Later that evening, as she prepared to leave the station, Reynolds approached one final time. "Commander, there's something I've been wanting to ask." He hesitated. "When you confronted Wilson, you could have neutralized him immediately. I saw how you moved. But you gave him a chance to surrender first. Why?" Amara considered the question carefully. "In special operations, we're trained to eliminate threats with maximum efficiency. But over my career, I learned that the most powerful weapon isn't technical skill or tactical advantage. It's the choice to use those abilities judiciously." She looked out at the station, where officers were returning to their duties, the day's crisis now transforming into tomorrow's lessons. Wilson made his choices, poor ones, destructive ones. But offering him the dignity of surrender wasn't about him. It was about who we choose to be in response to corruption, about maintaining our humanity even when confronting those who have lost their way. Reynolds nodded slowly. I think I understand. It's the difference between enforcing the law and embodying justice. Precisely, Officer Reynolds. That's why I believe this department has a future worth fighting for. Because officers like you still understand that distinction. As she left the building, Amara noticed a group of citizens gathered across the street.
Word of the day's events had spread, drawing community members concerned about what had happened at their police station. She approached them directly, introducing herself and explaining the situation with transparent honesty. Today was difficult, she acknowledged to the assembled crowd, but it was also necessary. Corruption thrives in darkness. Today, we turned on the lights, and this is just the beginning. An elderly woman stepped forward. Are we safe now? Can we trust our police again? Trust isn't restored in a single day, Amara replied honestly. It's rebuilt through consistent actions, transparency, and accountability. What I can promise you is that the process has begun, and I personally will ensure it continues. As the crowd dispersed, many nodding with cautious approval, Amara reflected on the path ahead. Wilson had been right about one thing. His corruption was likely part of a wider network. The real work was just beginning. But for the first time in decades, she felt a sense of purpose that matched her years in special forces. Protecting her new community from internal threats would require the same dedication, the same strategic thinking, the same unwavering commitment that had guided her military career. Commander Amara Jackson had spent her life defending her country from external enemies. Now, she would defend her community from enemies who wore badges and swore oaths they failed to honor. The battlefield had changed, but the mission remained the same: to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, to stand against those who abused power, and to uphold the principles that made her service meaningful. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, watching her community begin the healing process, Amara Jackson knew she was exactly where she needed to be. 6 months after Wilson's arrest, the City Hall chambers were filled to capacity. Citizens from every neighborhood sat shoulder to shoulder with uniformed officers, community leaders, and local officials. The atmosphere crackled with anticipation as Mayor Harrison approached the podium. Today marks a significant milestone for our community, he began, his voice carrying through the packed room. 6 months ago, we faced a crisis of trust. A corrupt network had infiltrated our police department, our courthouses, even City Hall itself. Many wondered if we could ever rebuild the sacred bond between public servants and the citizens they're sworn to protect. He gestured toward Amara, who sat in the front row beside Chief Peterson. That's when Commander Amara Jackson stepped forward, not just to expose corruption, but to help us rebuild from the foundation up. The crowd erupted in applause. Amara acknowledged it with a modest nod, her expression composed, but her eyes reflecting quiet satisfaction. The 6-month reform initiative had been the most challenging project of her career, more complex than any battlefield operation, more nuanced than any military strategy. Commander Jackson, would you please join me? Mayor Harrison extended his hand toward her. Amara rose and approached the podium with characteristic grace. Her dark blue suit was impeccably tailored, her posture straight but not rigid. The silver threads in her closely cropped hair caught the light as she turned to face the audience. Thank you, Mayor Harrison. Her voice carried easily, requiring no microphone to command attention. 6 months ago, I stood in this same chamber and promised comprehensive reforms, not just quick fixes or superficial changes, but a fundamental restructuring of how public safety operates in our community.
She gestured toward a large screen behind her, where photographs of community meetings, training sessions, and policy workshops appeared in sequence. "We began with transparency," she continued. "Every complaint against an officer is now publicly tracked. Every use of force is reviewed by a civilian oversight board. Every hiring decision, promotion, and disciplinary action follows clear, publicly available guidelines." The screen displayed statistical charts showing dramatic decreases in civilian complaints alongside increases in successful case resolutions and community engagement metrics. But numbers tell only part of the story. Amara's gaze swept across the audience, connecting with citizens and officers alike. "The real measure of our success is in the relationships we've rebuilt, the trust that has begun to root again."
In the audience, Mrs. Eleanor Washington, an 82-year-old community matriarch who had lived through decades of strained police-community relations, nodded appreciatively. 6 months earlier, she had confronted Amara at a contentious community meeting, expressing profound skepticism about promises of reform. "We've heard it all before," she had declared, her voice carrying the weight of generations of disappointment. "Fine words and fancy committees that change nothing on our streets." Today, she sat proudly in the front row. The Neighborhood Watch program she now co-led with Officer Reynolds had become a model for collaborative community safety throughout the city. "Perhaps most significantly," Amara continued, "we've implemented the Guardian Framework, a complete reimagining of police training that emphasizes de-escalation, community connection, and ethical decision-making above all else." The screen showed images of officers engaged in scenario-based training, community service projects, and mentorship programs with local youth. "Officers are no longer evaluated solely on metrics like arrests or citations," Amara explained. "Instead, we measure success through positive community interactions, problem-solving initiatives, and crisis prevention." Chief Peterson joined her at the podium. Once resistant to outside intervention, he had become one of the reform effort's strongest advocates after witnessing its impact firsthand. "What Commander Jackson isn't telling you," Peterson added with a smile, "is that our department has become a national model. We've hosted delegations from 12 major cities looking to implement similar reforms. The Justice Department has recognized our Guardian Framework as a best practice for departments nationwide." Mayor Harrison returned to the microphone. "Today, we're gathered for 2 important announcements. First, the City Council has unanimously voted to make the Guardian Framework and associated reforms permanent through binding legislation." Applause rippled through the chamber. Amara noticed Officer Jenkins among those clapping most enthusiastically. After his surrender during the Wilson incident, Jenkins had become one of the program's most dedicated advocates, working tirelessly to rebuild his reputation through service to the community. "Second," the mayor continued once the applause subsided, "we're establishing the Community Safety Leadership Academy, a permanent training center where law enforcement agencies from across the country can learn to implement these proven reforms." The mayor turned toward Amara. "And we're honored to announce that Commander Amara Jackson has agreed to serve as the founding director of the Academy." The standing ovation that followed was spontaneous and heartfelt. Officers rose alongside community members, united in their appreciation for the woman who had transformed crisis into opportunity. As Amara returned to the podium, she waited for silence before speaking again. "I accept this position with profound gratitude and a deep sense of responsibility," she began. "But I want to be clear about something. The transformation we've witnessed wasn't my achievement alone. It happened because officers like Reynolds, Jenkins, and Torres chose courage over comfort, because community leaders like Mrs. Washington chose engagement over cynicism, because every person in this room decided that public safety should be a shared responsibility, not a battleground." She paused, surveying the diverse faces before her. "Wilson's corruption didn't develop overnight. It grew in darkness, nurtured by silence and indifference.
Our progress grew the same way, not through dramatic confrontations, but through thousands of daily choices to prioritize integrity, accountability, and mutual respect. In the second row, Marcus Daniels, now retired from his Pentagon position, watched with evident pride. He had relocated to the community 3 months earlier to support Amara's work, bringing his intelligence background and global counter-corruption experience to the reform initiative. Today isn't an ending, it's a beginning. The Academy will ensure that what we've built here continues to grow and evolve, that the lessons we've learned, often painfully, become opportunities for communities across the nation.
After the ceremony concluded, Amara found herself surrounded by well-wishers, officers, community members, and officials eager to share their experiences of the transformation. She listened attentively to each one, acknowledging their contributions with genuine appreciation. Eventually, she made her way to where Mrs. Washington stood with Officer Reynolds, reviewing plans for an upcoming neighborhood safety walkthrough. "Commander Jackson," Mrs. Washington greeted her warmly, "I have something for you." From her handbag, she produced a faded photograph showing a young black woman in military uniform standing proudly before an American flag. "My daughter, Sophia," Mrs. Washington explained, "served 2 tours in Afghanistan before we lost her in 2010. She always said that true service doesn't stop when the uniform comes off. That's what you've shown us these past months." Amara accepted the photograph with profound respect. "I'm honored by the comparison, Mrs. Washington. Your daughter's spirit lives on through your community work." "She'd have approved of what you've built here," Mrs. Washington replied, her eyes glistening. "Especially the youth leadership program. Those children see possibilities now that weren't visible before." The Youth Leadership Initiative had been among Amara's most personal projects, connecting at-risk teenagers with mentors from law enforcement and community organizations. Several graduates of the program had already received college scholarships or entered public service careers. Reynolds gestured toward the City Hall entrance, where a small commotion had drawn attention. "Looks like your special guest has arrived, Commander." Amara turned to see Officer Jenkins escorting a tall man in prison attire through the crowd. Michael Wilson, considerably thinner than when she'd last seen him, walked with the slightly hunched posture of someone unaccustomed to public scrutiny. "You invited Wilson?" Mrs. Washington asked, unable to hide her surprise. "Yes," Amara confirmed. "Today isn't complete without him." She moved through the crowd, which parted silently as people recognized the former lieutenant. Wilson's eyes darted nervously until they locked with Amara's. His expression hardened momentarily before settling into something more complex, neither defiant nor repentant, but watchful. "Lieutenant Wilson," Amara greeted him with the same calm dignity she showed everyone. "Thank you for accepting my invitation." "Didn't have much choice. Federal marshals made it clear this was part of my cooperation agreement." Amara nodded. "Nevertheless, your presence matters. Please join me." She led him to a quieter corner of the chamber, where display boards showcased the reform initiatives implemented since his arrest. Wilson studied them with an unreadable expression. "Why am I here, Commander? To witness your triumph? To serve as the cautionary tale in your success story? You're here because every transformation needs context. These officers, these community members, they need to see you not as a monster, but as a person who made choices. Choices that any of them could make under similar circumstances." Laughed bitterly. "Always the tactical thinker. I'm just another strategic element in your master plan." "No, Wilson. You're here because, despite everything, you're still part of this community's story. The reforms we've implemented aren't just reactions to your corruption, they're protections against the conditions that made it possible." She gestured toward the Financial Oversight Board, where Officer Ramirez now served as a department liaison. Officers struggling with debt now have support systems. The pressures that made cartel money attractive have been addressed through salary reforms and financial counseling. "You think that would have made a difference for me?" Wilson's voice held genuine curiosity beneath the bitterness. "I think systems fail people before people fail systems. That doesn't excuse your choices, but it helps explain them. And understanding is the first step toward prevention.
It's different, Wilson finally admitted. The energy, the relationships. Nothing like this existed when I joined the force. That's why you're here, Amara explained. To see what's possible when power serves rather than dominates, when authority derives from trust rather than fear. Wilson's gaze drifted to Jenkins, now deeply engaged in conversation with community youth leaders. The kid turned out okay. He found his way back to his original purpose, Amara agreed. He remembered why he wanted to be an officer in the first place. And what about you, Commander? Wilson turned to face her directly. Did you find what you were looking for when you retired here? Peace? Purpose? Redemption for whatever ghosts follow you from your military career? The question was surprisingly perceptive, revealing an intelligence that had once made Wilson an effective officer before corruption consumed him. I found something I didn't know I was seeking, Amara admitted. In combat operations, success is measured in objectives achieved, threats neutralized. It's immediate but temporary. This work, rebuilding systems, reconnecting communities, its effects outlast any single action. Before Wilson could respond, Marcus approached them. Marshal say it's time, he informed them quietly. Wilson nodded, then hesitated. Commander Jackson, what you've built here, I couldn't have done it. Even before the corruption, I didn't have the vision. Few individuals do, Amara replied. That's why community transformation requires collective effort. No single leader, no matter how skilled, can impose change from above. It grows from shared commitment to something larger than ourselves. As Jenkins escorted Wilson back to the federal marshals waiting outside, Amara rejoined the celebration. The Academy's inaugural class of leadership fellows had gathered near the podium. 40 officers from departments nationwide, selected for their commitment to reform. Commander Jackson, a young officer from Baltimore, approached her. I've been studying your Guardian framework for months, but seeing it in action today, the relationships, the trust, it's transformative. How do we replicate this back home? You don't replicate, Amara corrected gently. You adapt the principles to your community's specific needs and history. The framework isn't a template. It's a process for collaborative problem-solving between officers and the communities they serve. Chief Peterson joined them, bringing Mayor Harrison and several city council members. We've approved the funding for the Academy's first expansion phase, including the Community Trauma Response Center you proposed. The Trauma Response Center had been Amara's most ambitious recommendation, a facility where communities could address the psychological impact of historical injustices, creating space for healing alongside institutional reform. Excellent, Amara responded. We'll integrate it with the cross-training program for officers and mental health professionals. As the evening progressed, Amara found a moment to step outside onto the City Hall steps. The sunset painted the sky in dramatic oranges and purples, silhouetting the city skyline she had come to call home. Marcus joined her, offering a cup of tea, a small ritual they had maintained since their military days. Quite a legacy you're building, he observed, gazing over the city. A far cry from our original retirement plans. Amara smiled slightly. The best missions rarely follow the original parameters. Speaking of missions, Marcus handed her a secure tablet displaying a message from their former Pentagon liaison. They're requesting your consultation on implementing similar reforms in federal law enforcement agencies. Apparently, your success here has attracted attention in Washington. Amara considered the request thoughtfully. The work here is just beginning. The Academy needs to establish strong foundations before expanding its scope. They're not asking you to leave. They want to bring federal leadership here, to learn from what you've built, to see community-centered security in action. Then yes, but on our terms. No classified sessions, no closed-door meetings. Complete transparency with community partners. The federal agencies need to understand that reform isn't a public relations exercise. It's a fundamental shift in approach. Marcus grinned. Commander Jackson's conditions for engagement. They won't like it, but they'll accept it. Your reputation precedes you. Reynolds approached them hesitantly.
Commander, sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation developing in the Riverside neighborhood. Community Patrol reported unusual activity near the abandoned warehouse district. Drug distribution? Amara asked, immediately alert. Possibly, but they followed protocol. Observation only, no engagement, waiting for proper response teams. Amara nodded approvingly. The system working as designed. Coordinate with the task force. I want community representatives involved in the planning phase before any action is taken. As Reynolds departed to implement her instructions, Marcus observed, 6 months ago, they would have gone in with tactical teams, no community consultation, probable confrontation. And perpetuated the cycle of mistrust, Amara agreed. Now they'll address the immediate issue while engaging with underlying causes, economic conditions, youth programs, treatment resources. They watched as the response team assembled in the parking lot, officers alongside community outreach workers, treatment specialists, and neighborhood representatives. The holistic approach hadn't been easy to implement, facing resistance from traditionalists who equated effective policing with aggressive tactics. Your methods challenged everything they knew, Marcus remarked, yet now they're true believers. Not methods, Amara corrected. Principles. Dignity, transparency, accountability, collaboration. The methods adapt to each situation, but the principles remain constant. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from commanding elite units in classified operations to rebuilding community trust in a city she now called home. The skills that had made her an effective combat leader, strategic thinking, personnel development, adaptability under pressure, had found new expression in civilian service. Tomorrow's first day training the new Academy Fellows, Amara noted, watching the sun disappear beyond the horizon. They arrive with high expectations. They'll leave with something better, Marcus predicted, a roadmap for meaningful change in their own communities. Inside City Hall, the celebration continued. Through the windows, Amara could see officers engaged in animated conversations with community members, planning committees reviewing upcoming initiatives, young cadets observing it all with eager attention. The energy was palpable, not the artificial enthusiasm of a political event, but the genuine commitment of people united in purpose. Mrs. Washington emerged from the building and joined them on the steps. "There you are, Commander. Everyone's asking for you inside. They want to hear more about the national expansion plans. The plans will evolve with input from every community involved. That's the point of the Academy. Shared wisdom, not imposed solutions." Mrs. Washington nodded approvingly. "You know, when you first arrived, I thought you were just another outsider with big ideas and no understanding of our history. I've never been happier to be wrong." Amara smiled warmly. "The first lesson of special operations, Mrs. Washington, listen before you act. The community always knows what it needs. Our job is to remove obstacles and provide resources." As they walked back inside together, Amara surveyed the gathering with quiet satisfaction. 6 months earlier, she had confronted a corrupt officer in her own home, never imagining it would lead to this transformation. What began as a personal violation had become an opportunity for community healing. What started as a retirement disrupted had evolved into a new mission with far-reaching impact than any military operation. The path hadn't been easy. Reform never was. There had been resistance from entrenched interests, skepticism from those who'd heard promises before, setbacks that tested their collective resolve. But with each challenge overcome, the foundation grew stronger. Officer Reynolds approached with several Academy trainees. "Commander, they have questions about implementing the accountability framework in smaller departments with limited resources." "Then let's find solutions together." Amara led them toward the planning tables, where maps and organizational charts outlined the reform strategy.
As the evening continued, she moved through the celebration, listening more than speaking, connecting people with complementary ideas, ensuring every voice had opportunity to contribute. This was leadership as she had come to understand it, not commanding from above, but facilitating from within, creating conditions where collective wisdom could flourish. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The Academy would welcome its first official class. Federal agencies would begin studying their model for national implementation. Other communities would seek guidance for their own transformation efforts. The work would continue, evolving as it expanded. But tonight, watching this diverse gathering united in common purpose,
Commander Amara Jackson allowed herself a moment of reflection. In 27 years leading Special Forces, she had protected her country from countless external threats. Now, in this second chapter, she was helping communities protect themselves from internal ones, not through force, but through connection, accountability, and shared commitment to something greater than individual interests. Different battlefield, same mission, safeguarding the principles that gave her service meaning. Different weapons, same purpose, creating space where justice could take root and grow. Different uniform, same oath, to protect and serve those who could not protect themselves. As midnight approached, Amara stood on the City Hall steps once more, gazing over the community that had become her new mission. The stars above were the same stars she had navigated by in distant combat zones. The principles guiding her were the same ones that had sustained her through decades of service. But here, in this unlikely second chapter, she had found something rare and precious. The opportunity to build rather than defend, to connect rather than confront, to transform rather than overcome. Commander Amara Jackson had spent her life in service to her country. Now she served something even more fundamental, the daily, patient work of creating justice where once corruption had ruled. And in that service, she had found her true command.